Well, here we are, everyone. Good morning. It's just right around 9:30 on Saturday, September 20th. Many of you are tuning in right now to join us for this really exciting day of learning. Others of you are actually watching this in the future. Say hi to all of you in the future, because our sessions today are being streamed live and then archived and will be held back on our website and then shortly after on our YouTube channel as well. So the good news is this is a conference where if you wish you could duplicate yourself, you actually kind of can. You could watch, you could call in to Donalyn during the first session and then come back and watch Renee later, or you could tune in to Jess during the first session and come back and watch Kathy later. It's the kind of conference where you really could attend every single session. So we're really excited to have you here. Another hi to all of you watching in the future. So I am Chris Lehman. I'm the founding director of the Educator Collaborative. We're a think tank and a education consulting organization. And our goal is to innovate the ways that educators learn together. We come from a wide and diverse background covering kindergarten all the way up through high school and even university level instruction. We study technology and literacy, the content areas, and we're so excited to have you here with us today. First, one really exciting thing is this being an online conference today, we are able to get some data from those of you that have been tuning in or checking our website. So one thing to share is as you're joining us today, you could be sitting almost literally anywhere around the world. The last list included places like lots of you here from the United States. People are joining us today from Canada, Mexico, Ireland, Lebanon, Malaysia, Singapore, Jordan, Guatemala, Spain, Honduras, Estonia, New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, Venezuela, Taiwan, Vietnam, and I'm sure several other places that I didn't quite catch on the list. If you're here and you want to say hello, you can use our conference hashtag. It's hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering. And you'll see and hear that throughout the day. And with that hashtag, you can just say, hi, I'm joining you from, just to shout out to all of your other friends here from around the world. So I wanted to start out with some logistics to help you understand how the day works and the best way that you can join with us, whether you're live or in the future. Then in just a few moments, Elizabeth Lacy, one of our team members here, will come on to introduce Donalyn Miller for her keynote. So some logistical things around today. First of all, there are many, many of you that are joining us. Our website is set on a dedicated server. We've updated and upgraded everything. It should be pretty smooth running. But in the event that you're trying to join a session or something's not working, there's a few things you can do. Number one, refresh your browser. That's the easiest thing to do. Just refresh the browser, and chances are whatever was stuck will get unstuck. You also can join us on Twitter if you follow our handle @TheEdCollab, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. But if you follow @TheEdCollab, all day long we'll be tweeting out the direct video link to each session. So if the website isn't working so well, you can go straight to, you can follow our YouTube handle and you'll see all the direct links there, and you can literally just click the little video and you'll be able to watch it. You also can access all of the sessions on our gathering page. And here, I'll show that to you right here. So on our gathering page, here's the way that you can visually access all the work that we're doing today, and there's lots of ways that you can do it. So one is you can use this search function on the side here to choose a topic that interests you. So if you click like middle school, for example, all of the sessions that are directed towards middle school educators or have some middle school information inside of it will pop up for you. You also can click on our agenda at a glance, and here are direct links to all of the session pages. And then let's say you are really looking forward to seeing Kathy Collins' workshop during session 1. When you click on that, you'll be taken to her page, and right there will be the video. If you click it right now, it'll say coming soon, but at the start of session 1, you'll see it. If you're not quite sure which sessions to attend, there's two ways to see the set that happens during each session. One is like I'm doing right now, just hover over the menu, and then you can see like during session 2, Luis Perez on supporting diverse learners, Kristen Zemke on social media and elementary, Sarah Ahmed on engaging middle school learners, and Jonathan Olson on student voices in our teaching. You also can click directly on that session, and then you can see the smiling faces of our amazing educators today, and an overview of all of them. And then you just click on any one of those. So if I want to go see Sarah's session live, I can click on it and I'll be taken to her page. So that's another way that you can access all the work we're doing today. The last one is if everything breaks, because this is the internet and who knows, if everything breaks, we have one mirror site. It's this one right here, the educatorcollaborative.wordpress.com. So the educatorcollaborative.wordpress.com. You might just want to bookmark that. That site doesn't look as pretty as all of this. However, it does have the full agenda that goes directly to the video links. So we wanted to make sure there were lots of opportunities for you to check in and follow with us along today. A couple other quick announcements. One is that, and here I'll leave this up to show you. One is that most of today we have streaming videos. However, there are two special events that are call-ins. And so these are opportunities that you can talk directly with Donalyn, and I'll be joining her on that call, or you could talk with me later in the day at 2 o'clock. And so these two sessions are not streaming live over the web. Instead, they're ones that you can quite literally pick up your phone and call Donalyn Miller. I mean, come on, that's awesome. So you can pick up your phone and call. So in order to do that, some of you have already pre-registered for spots. We've had that on our website for a couple days now. If you already pre-registered, we will call you. So you should get a call around that time. If not, you are also given the number. If you have not registered yet, there still is space. The space will be there until it's full. So if you want to join that session live, you just click on this little link here, and it'll actually now just take you directly to a phone number that you can call. So just know that during session 1, which is right after the keynote, you can call in, and Donalyn will be talking, and I'm going to join because I'm interested too. She'll be talking about what works in reaching uninspired readers. And the idea with the call is it's kind of like a Twitter chat, except for we actually really get to hear each other's voices. So it'll be an informal conversation that Donalyn will be leading and I'll be a part of to talk about uninspired readers, ways that you're reaching them, and to brainstorm together ways to reach them too. Then the other session with me is during session 4, so that's at 2 o'clock, and it's a call-in conversation where I'll be talking about, really informally with whoever would like to join, I'll be talking informally about our work at the Educator Collaborative and ways that your school or organization could work with us, like have us come work with you or meet with us online, and I'll talk about some of our offerings. I also can talk about ways that you could join our team too if you are interested in being a part of what we do in big or small ways. So that's a really informal conversation where I'll just share some updates about the work that we're doing together. So I have a little story for you about this last thing that I'm really, really excited about. So today, what you should know is everyone who's here, the people who are running these streams, the presenters that are talking to you, every single person here today is volunteering their time. We're using today as really a gift to all of you for all the work that you do, the belief that you hold in our profession, in each other, and in our kids. And we wanted to offer you an opportunity to connect with people that we're inspired by. So everyone today is really giving of their time and volunteering themselves. The one caveat with that is that I talked to Donalyn and said, well, you know, I think one thing we should do is you know, keynotes. It's kind of a tradition that when you're keynoting somewhere, even on a voluntary sort of day, that there's some honorarium. So like, you know, some small gift back to the person who's helping to really launch the day. So I talked with Donalyn about this. She was very, very kind and very sweet and kind of avoiding that conversation as much as she could. And then eventually she said this. She said, well, you know, how about this? I'll accept that gift if I can give it away. And what she decided to do is to give that gift away to the Book Love Foundation. So that, and I'll talk about that in a minute, Donalyn's thought to say, that's really kind of you, thanks, but I want to give this to an organization that's doing really great good, really, really touched me. And it really made me think, we should be doing that. This is something that we as an organization should be doing. So starting today, and inspired by Donalyn's really kind gift, we are going to adopt a charity during each of our Ed Collab gatherings. So we hope to have these once or twice every year, and we'll adopt a charity for each. So the charity I'd like to reacquaint you with or introduce you to, if you haven't met them before, is the Book Love Foundation. So the Book Love Foundation was founded by my friend and yours, Penny Kittle, educator and author. And the Book Love Foundation seeks to promote the love of reading amongst adolescents by providing classroom libraries of highly engaging books to middle and high school English teachers. I have actually been in a school that has gotten one of these classroom libraries, and I'll tell you, two incredible things happen. One, the teacher cries. One, the teacher's moved because suddenly an entire wall of amazing, engaging books shows up for that class. The other is kids are invited into a world of experience, engagement, and just a love of reading in a larger way than they had been before. So in order to do this, Penny goes out and tells the story of the Book Love Foundation and asks for donations as well. So throughout today, we're not going to keep a tally board. We won't have any sort of fundraiser music that's going on or acts that are happening. But what I would like you to do is to consider that today is our totally free gift to you. So if at some point today you feel particularly moved or really inspired, or there was a session that really amazed you, one way that you can thank everyone who's giving of their time freely today is to make even a small donation to the Book Love Foundation. Think of it as your way of saying thanks to someone who did a great session for you. So you can find the Book Love Foundation right here on our main page. It also is on our mirror site as well. We made it really easy. There's a gigantic click to donate button. Or off on the side here, if you click on the Book Love Foundation logo, you'll be taken directly to their website as well. And from there, you can make your donation. So really, as I said, it's not that we're doing a telethon today or we're having that. We just thought that we're all aiming to do the best good, and it just felt right, and especially from Donalyn's suggestion, it just felt right to adopt a charity. And so we look forward to doing that in the future as well for each of these gatherings. And even $1 is $1 closer to helping engage students with great books. The other thing I should mention is if you're a teacher that wishes you had really incredible books that you could be reading too, the Book Love Foundation annually accepts proposals from teachers and then selects some teachers to get a Book Love Foundation full library grant. So you may also want to check out their homepage so that you could do the same. So just a couple more things before we start. One is I'd like to share with you another way that you can be connected with us, and that is our community page, which many of you are actually already members of. So the Educator Collaborative community page is a group site and a forum site that's free, and another way that educators can work together. What I'm excited about today is that we get to bring you amazing thinkers and incredibly passionate teachers and coaches and organization leaders. The thing I wish we could do more of in this platform is really talk and collaborate together. So the Educator Collaborative community is one way you can do that. So in the groups page here, these are all groups that were started. Some were started by members of our team, but many were started by just others of you in the field. And so there's groups on different grade levels, like upper elementary, middle school. There's groups that talk about writers. There's groups for library and media specialists. And these are all opportunities, like in middle school, for you to connect with other educators. So you can go to community.theeducatorcollaborative.com. And for example, here's, I said, yay, middle school, but here's a post by Terry where she was asking for suggestions about middle school read-alouds. So here's a way that you can share your questions, you can share your answers, and really can talk and work together. So we invite you, when you have a free moment and you aren't busily clicking on streams to watch today, to consider joining us over at the Educator Collaborative community. So the last tip that I'll give you before, in a few minutes, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth, is that today's a really full day. So you may want to take a moment before we start, if you haven't already, to check out the agenda. And again, you can go back to gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. And from that page, you can make kind of a path that you'll take today. So you might want to jot down which session you'd like to join in session 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to the closing. There's about 15 minutes between each session, but they will move rather quickly. And as I said, the other way you can look too is clicking, for example, here we could say middle school, and then all of the options for middle school will show up as well. So I invite you to just take a moment, check out the agenda, and decide where you will take yourself today. So whether you're joining us from right here in the States or from somewhere around the world, we are honored that you're here with us for this exciting day of learning. Our hope and our goal and kind of our vision into the future is that we find more ways to help educators connect with one another. In the world that we live in right now, there's so many questions, there's so many challenges, and there's so many different possible answers that people are sending our way. At times, it makes the work that we do feel incredibly inspiring, but at other times, it feels so overwhelming to not know which road to take or what to think about implementing standards or working with RTI or assessments or teacher evaluations. What we know is that the more that we in our profession can talk to each other and sit around a table together, or even like this, connect from far distances away, we together are able to do incredible and amazing things. So we're going to get ready to move over to our keynote here with Donalyn. Let me check to see if our friend Elizabeth is ready for us. Elizabeth, are you there?
I think I'm there.
Yeah,
Am I here?
there you are. Yep, here you are. So Elizabeth is a member of our the Educator Collaborative team, and she also is presenting later today. And just before Elizabeth starts, one thing I should say is today we have inside of our large list of people presenting. We have special guest faces that you know and love. We have members of our team, and I'm especially excited that we also have a number of educators who submitted a proposal for a session 2, and that's something that we'll continue to do going forward. So as you're looking at the agenda today, you'll see that there's little hearts next to the people that were our special invites. You'll see names of people from our team, but also join in the sessions with some of the great educators that wanted to give of their time today as well, without us even having to beg them. It was amazing. So I'm really excited about the large cast that we have in today's work. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Elizabeth, to introduce Donalyn Miller.
Okay, is it me? Am I on?
Yep, you're on.
Good morning. So it is such an honor to be here today introducing Donalyn Miller. I have followed her first through her blogs and then through every NCTE session I could possibly attend that she was at, and then through her books. She is always reinvigorating to me because she confirms what I know is most important, but that we sometimes forget, which is how important it is to find that right book for every child, and how if a child says they don't love reading, it's just that they haven't found the right book yet, or perhaps they haven't been given enough time to read that book. A year ago, I actually used Donalyn Miller, so I want to give her credit and also just let her know that I drop her name whenever I can around the world. I went to my principal and I said, we need to talk about the real crisis in our school. And it's not test scores and it's not data points. The real crisis we have right now is that children aren't clutching books with them everywhere they go. I said, please read this, and then let's talk. Read this, and then we need to talk because I have some ideas. This led us to DEAR, which is a period of time we now have in our school, Drop Everything and Read. It is 25 minutes every single day where everyone in our building reads. The teachers, the counselors, the secretary, the students, the dean. And I wear this badge. I think of it sometimes as my tribute to Donalyn Miller badge. I am the Dear Patrol, and I patrol the hallways, and I give out books when kids are not wanting to read. I have stashes of books because of course the answer is you need to try this book or that book, which is something that Donalyn Miller has instilled in me over the years. And teachers at my school have gone from saying, well, how come we don't have DEAM time, drop everything in math, to saying, hey, do you have Scorched Trials? Because I just finished Maze Runner and it ended on a cliffhanger and I need to know what happens next. So I realized that this tattered badge isn't the grand tribute that you, Donalyn Miller, deserve. But it is a sincere token of my gratitude towards the work you've done in this world, which is teaching everyone to instill this love of reading in people and just reminding us what really matters with it, and also giving us useful tools and ways to do that. So that is where I'm going to hand it over to you, and I hope that people today truly appreciate all of the wonderful strategies and ideas you will share with us today. So everyone in the world, this is Donalyn Miller. Please enjoy and appreciate her time.
Good morning. I want to give a special shout out. I'm not sure that you're seeing me. I just had this panic that you couldn't see me.
Yep, you're good. We can see you.
I want to give a special shout out to all of our friends who are in different time zones like I am, and you got up extremely early on a Saturday so that you could join us for learning today. Speaks highly of you that you're willing to do this pajama PD on a Saturday and join us. I'd also like to thank Chris Lehman for inviting me to be a part of this. This is just an exciting day and an exciting kickoff for the Educator Collaborative. You know, listening to my Texas homegirl, Kylene Beers, a few years ago, Kylene said, you know, the smartest person in the room is the room. And so thank you for being part of this room of great educators who have all come together to learn. Our topic today for my keynote is really looking at how we can engage students with nonfiction reading. But we're really looking at a deeper issue, which is that issue of what I call genre avoidance, that issue of how can we get kids to read the things that they may be unwilling or uninterested in reading. So you may have students who are really great, who love nonfiction and are excited about it, but maybe they don't like poetry. So take our suggestions today as something that you can apply as sticky strategies to engage students with the types of books that they may not be interested in reading. And yes, my cheesy clip art in my title slide is up there for a reason. I really did not think these were the best clip art that I could show you, but it kind of reminds me of how kids go about reading nonfiction and sharing nonfiction in the classroom traditionally versus how we'd like to make them more engaged. You can find all of my presentations at this SlideShare page at www.slideshare.net/DonalynM, and I also put on this page book lists. For example, there's a K-12 read aloud list, 100 popular books for middle schoolers, all of the Nerdy Book Club award lists for the past several years. I also house PDFs of all of the reader's notebook sheets that I use with my students, as well as some conferring forms so that you can go in and just grab those resources for free. I'm very active on Twitter. My tweet ID is Donalyn Books. I tried to get the Book Whisperer years ago as my tweet ID, and someone else was already using it, and so I went into that panic that many of us feel when our username is already taken, and so I have Donalyn Books now, and I know that I've connected with many of you over the years through Twitter. In fact, I think I met Chris Lehman for the first time on Twitter. I'm not certain about that, but it seems right to say that.
Yes. Sorry to interject, but yes.
No, that's fine. I'm so glad that I've met him face to face too, but glad that we connected online. I also have my website, www.bookwhisperer.com. That houses my blog. It houses my presentation calendar. It also houses a blog roll of other websites that I would recommend for you and that I use for my own personal learning, and it also houses links to my most requested articles. The two this summer that were most requested, one was titled How to Accelerate a Reader. I'll give you a hint, it's not Accelerated Reader. And the second one is called Guess My Lexile, second most requested this summer, about the over-reliance on Lexile as a measure of text complexity. And so those are clearly topics that teachers are engaged with learning more about. And as Elizabeth said earlier, I'm the author of The Book Whisperer, and then, of course, Reading in the Wild. You know, we can launch this conversation to kind of just look at our own preferences in reading. So I want you to think for a moment, and you could certainly tweet these if you'd like. Which genres do you prefer to read? Like, given removing all restrictions or demands on your reading life, if you could just read a certain type of book over and over again, what would it be for you? And then I also want you to think about what genres do you avoid reading? And be honest, you know, what are those kinds of books that, you say, oh my goodness, I would never read that. I hate those kinds of books. I just don't enjoy them, or I just can't fall into that kind of book. I want you to think about those genres for just a moment. So I'll just be very honest with you about my own preferences too. I am a epic fantasy tome kind of a gal. If it's got a dragon and a girl in a medieval dress on the cover, I'm there. I love those books. The thicker, the better. I think that comes from my years of my sister and I walking to the library once a week, and we could only carry so many books. And so I would always pick some giant tome that would last me for the whole week until we went back to the library again. I also was fond of sprawling historicals like James Michener novels that stretched over generations of a family. And as far as what genres I avoid, I think it depends. Sometimes I'm not overly fond of, for example, biographies written for children. I think they're dry as toast. I think all the racy, exciting things that we love to read about real-world figures are kind of sanitized in children's books, and so they're not as interesting for me to read. I also really struggle to read things like poetry. I really have to be in the mood for certain kinds of poetry, although I love children's poetry. Now, Now, leading to the next question, what would your students say to the same questions? You know, if you were to think about the students that you work with this year, what would they consider to be their favorite genres, and what perhaps might be genres of reading that they avoid? You know, it's always interesting to me how I have some students that really seem to go against the grain. They dislike the same kinds of books everyone else does, or they really enjoy kind of a niche kind of a book. Or you'll have, one year I'll have a lot of students that love Rick Riordan and all those great fantasy series, and then other years I'll have kids who really love to read nonfiction. You know, this summer, or this past January, when my students came back from school, winter break, and this was my 5th grade class, I had my students take a survey, kind of a check-in survey. We were setting some goals for the spring, and I gave them a preferences survey. And of course, the way I walked myself through that survey and modeling for the kids how I wanted them to take it and consider the questions, I put the survey up on the document camera in my classroom, and I took the survey in front of my students, and we just kind of talked. And when we came to the question, what's your favorite genre, I was really surprised. The students were trying to help me answer the question because they all thought they knew me so well. And students all around the room, Riley, well, she likes historical fiction. She gave me Odette's Secret and Number of the Stars to read. And Alex saying she likes nonfiction books about snakes and whales and panda bears. She always talks to us about those. And then my 2 little boys that loved, Neil and Jeremy, who loved all things Greek mythology, they said, no, she loves mythology. And what I found interesting about that, I had to laugh because every child, it seemed, thought that my favorite genre was their favorite genre. And I will tell you that was an evolution in my teaching. It wasn't always the case. It's not that I would try to hide my preferences from my students, but what I realized was that it was very easy for me as a teacher to gravitate towards the children who like the same books that I do. It was easy to build those relationships with my other fantasy fans or my other people that like to read Greek mythology, or other people, other students who might like books that make you cry, all things that I like. But I realized that I might be missing an opportunity to build a relationship with students who may prefer genres that I dislike, or fail to bless those types of books or promote them in the classroom. And I certainly didn't want the message to be to my students that certain types of reading, my types of reading, were more valuable or more important than the types of reading that they like to do. So moving in my teaching, we're always that reflective practitioner where we're thinking about what our kids are really telling us in the classroom and how that shapes their reading lives. It occurred to me that I couldn't let my preferences in what I like to read become biases in what I put in front of my students to read. Getting to know our readers and sharing with them all types of books so that they can not only feel supported as readers and be widely read by trying lots of different kinds of texts and books to read, but also so that no matter what type of reader they are, they feel valued in the classroom. Now, so here are 3, this is Ashley, Lizzie, and Hoyen. I always joke that the young man in the back with the jacket over his head, I don't know his name, but because his face was covered, I didn't have to get a release for the photo. These girls are reading on a field trip, and Ashley, it fascinates me how every year we seem to have a student or two that teach us more than we ever taught them, and Ashley was certainly that type of student for me. Ashley was a voracious reader. She read a couple of books a week. She was very adventurous. You might be able to see she's reading an Agatha Christie book in this particular photo. And Ashley was really an engaged reader, but conferring with Ashley in the spring, I realized she had read scores of books, almost 100 books by the spring, and yet she had read no nonfiction books to read, which kind of surprised me. I thought she's such a risk taker, and she loves to read so much. So talking with her, I said, Ashley, perhaps you could jump into the nonfiction pool and try some things. I think you'd really find some books that you enjoy. And Ashley said to me, I hate nonfiction, Mrs. Miller. It's all about dead presidents and whales. And so laughing with Ashley, of course, you try not to laugh at a child, but I was amused by her remark, and we were sharing, and I said, so that's when we get our therapist voice when we're talking to kids, and I said, Ashley, tell me more about that. And she said, Mrs. Miller, the only time we read nonfiction books at school and she was a sixth grader. The only time we read nonfiction books at school is when we have a report, and the science teacher or the social studies teacher wants us to do a report. And so, we're always doing like a report on a president, or pick an animal and write a report on its habitat. And it occurred to me that that was Ashley's perception of nonfiction as a sixth grader, was that it was a vehicle to produce an assignment or a report, but it was so markedly not something that she would want to read on her own for enjoyment or for edification or for information. So we can go to this question and, think about, what are your students' experience with nonfiction text? Thinking about their daily reading and their reading lives, what do we see as some of the experiences that they might have had over their lives with nonfiction texts, and how they approach nonfiction, how they're exposed to nonfiction, and how they're really using nonfiction to learn more about themselves and the world? I think about my own daughters. I've never taught primary grades. I'm just so amazed of people like Kristen Zemke, who do such a great job teaching really young students. But when I think about my own two daughters, they loved nonfiction when they were small. We would go to the library and check out all the Gail Gibbons books. Their girls were very curious about the world. Where do rainbows come from? And looking at the life cycle of butterflies. We also read a lot of the David Adler picture book biographies, and these two authors are probably well known to you because of their contributions in writing nonfiction for our younger students. But what I did notice, even with my own children and with my students, is that as students got older, as the young readers got older, they seemed to be exposed to less nonfiction. Great primary teachers and preschool teachers who are working with small young learners, they weave that nonfiction throughout the day, and they often have their students in a self-contained classroom, and they're able to expose them to nonfiction in science class and social studies, and they may often integrate a lot of those texts throughout the day for their students. But as students get older and we move into more departmentalized classes, they see that nonfiction less, and the nonfiction they're exposed to may very well be only through that report reading that Ashley was talking about. And even as we're moving into a language arts classroom, a math classroom, a science classroom, a social studies classroom, we may not feel as comfortable as language arts and English teachers just naturally integrating that nonfiction throughout the class day. And talking to Ashley, the only time you need a nonfiction book is when you're researching a report, Mrs. Miller. I don't read those books for fun. So then we get these books, then we get Ashley going off into the world to do her whale report, and we wind up with presentations like this, where Ashley has clearly spent way more time on designing her title slide. This is where her engagement is coming from in the clip art that she's gotten together for her cheesy title slide for her PowerPoint presentation on whales. It's not the content that's intriguing to her, and she's looking for a way to remain engaged and excited about the topic. I know you may have seen these types of presentations yourself, if not in your own classroom, then out in the wild somewhere. So when we're really looking at nonfiction in the upper grades, we have to consider how are students meeting nonfiction and how they're being exposed to it. For many of our students, in upper grades, the primary nonfiction reading that they're still doing is textbook reading, or even reading the online textbook for the course. Some teachers still feel a little nervous about using the internet. They may feel like it's too much trouble, or their students are going onto the internet and finding sites that are not the most credible or the most valuable for their research. So let's look at and think about, how do students' nonfiction reading experiences and needs change over time? Is there an evolution of a reader as this nonfiction reader, and are the needs of that 6-year-old who wants to read about butterflies and rainbows different when that child moves into being a middle schooler or an upper elementary student? And how can we really navigate as teachers those changing needs and that way that we expose our students to nonfiction? In our information age, students must become strong readers and evaluators of nonfiction text, both online and off. The majority of reading that students will be doing in their lives on a regular basis will be nonfiction reading. Now, I'm certainly not promoting getting rid of fiction. I mean, how could I do that? Getting rid of fiction or poetry or any of the other genres that we know students need to read, but we know that they also need to be strong readers of nonfiction, to understand the structures and features of nonfiction text, and to be able to access nonfiction information in order to enhance their learning and their understanding of the world. Now, I did say that this was really a presentation on genre avoidance, and I could just have easily have called this presentation Consumptive Maidens and Rainbows, Engaging Readers with Poetry. You know, we're really looking at stretching our students and creating opportunities where they are challenging themselves to read things that they might otherwise not seek out on their own. You know, I want my students to read widely from every genre. I want them to do that for two main reasons, really. The primary reason, of course, is that we want our students to be well-rounded readers. You know, the analogy I always make with my students is a sports analogy. You know, if you're playing basketball and you only work on your jump shot, you're going to probably have a great jump shot or take it as far as you could take it. But in order to be a really good all-around basketball player, you have to practice dribbling, passing, guarding, as well as that great jump shot. And we certainly want our students to be good all-around readers. We want them to understand how to read a poem, how to read a play, how to read a nonfiction article, and of course, how to read a fiction book. Great poetry book, Dizzy in Your Eyes. Yes, we're really looking at this topic of genre avoidance. So on the slides that follow, I've put nonfiction in bright red, and if you don't feel like nonfiction is an area where your students might struggle with connecting with books, just replace the genre with anything else that you feel like your students are avoiding, because I feel like our suggestions are stretchy, and they really are looking at how we can promote students reading other things outside of their comfort zone. As I said in Reading in the Wild, with any other genre they avoid reading. When my students claim they dislike reading nonfiction, I assume that they lack positive, meaningful reading experiences with reading it. So here's some suggestions for turning around with genre avoidance, and I certainly encourage you to use the hashtag if you're on Twitter to share your thoughts and ideas as well, because we can archive that and then learn from all of you as well. The first thing would be, how can we find nonfiction that connects to students' personal interests? You know, for many years I've taught language arts and social studies. So I've taught world cultures in 6th grade here in Texas. I've taught American history in 5th grade and also Texas history in 4th grade. And I will tell you, as much as I want to integrate those social studies books into my classroom, and I do, I also know that sometimes for my students, their first choice or their first inroad into reading nonfiction isn't the Andrew Hamilton biography that I have in my classroom or the great book that I have on World War II. It's showing them that they really are interested in reading nonfiction already as it connects to their personal interests. So things like all my gamers in the classroom who want Game Informer or Minecraft books that they could use, or books on coding that match a personal interest, books on sports. What are they interested in outside of school that we could use to leverage? I use the word leverage quite a bit. How can we leverage that interest in outside activities with text that we could put into the classroom? You know, this year the rubber band jewelry craze was in full zenith in my classroom, and lots of my students, girls and boys, making rubber band jewelry. I had many rubber band bracelets and bookmarks and rings that my students made me throughout the year. And so just even talking to my students, I'm not an expert in Minecraft or rubber band jewelry. I'll admit that. My children are older. We don't have a rubber band jewelry loom at my house. I wouldn't even know how to make one. So this is also an opportunity to value students' expertise. I invited 2 of my boys, Mason and Josh, who were big into Minecraft, and I said, okay, guys, I'd like to get some Minecraft books into the class library. I have no idea what would be the best books for us, that would be the most useful to you, that would be interesting. And so they agreed to just research what were some of the Minecraft books available, and then help me pick a few that would be great for additions for our classroom library. We can also add more nonfiction to our daily book talks. You know, Linda Gambrell, who's been in the reading research field for almost 40 years, she says children read what we bless. And if we feel like our students are avoiding a certain genre or style of book, it might be that we don't book talk it enough and do enough book commercials on it in the classroom. I know this was always true for me as a teacher too. I would always come into the classroom with a great novel that I found or a great new poetry book, but I wasn't promoting as much nonfiction in the classroom with my students on a daily basis. And so just increasing how much nonfiction we put in the classroom and promote to kids can increase how much they read it. And it can also, again, validate those students who that might be their preference. They might not be interested in reading every great novel that comes down the pike. And looking for nonfiction that might even pique the interest of students who have less interest in picking it up on their own. So Steve Jenkins is certainly an author that many of us know with all of his great paper cutout, research books. The animal book that came out last year is an animal encyclopedia with a lot of facts about animals. John Cheska's Knucklehead is certainly a book I've read out loud to students many years. If you're looking for great examples of a personal narrative, it's hard to find those out in the wild, and John has certainly offered us that with his memoir about his experiences with growing up with his brothers. Another great nonfiction book just might increase students' knowledge about a topic where they feel they have interest. You know, you might feel like we've seen every great book about World War II. Every story that could be told about World War II has been told, but this particular book, Pure Grit, looks at how American nurses and women who were actually participating in World War II, how they survived prison camp in the Pacific, how they came together as a group to support one another, and that's certainly a story that needs to be told. If you have, excuse me, I don't want to cough in your ear. If you have Frozen fans in the classroom, and who doesn't? I mean, you could probably walk up to any 9-year-old and just start singing Let It Go, and they would take it from there. And I had a lot of crazy Frozen fans in my classroom in the past 2 years. But this is a book that you might put in front of them because you might remember the line in Let It Go where she says frozen fractals all around. Well, my students, we could talk about alliteration with frozen fractals, but we could also certainly introduce to our students what a fractal is in nature with this wonderful nonfiction book, Mysterious Patterns, Finding Fractals in Nature, which has incredible photographs of what a fractal is. And I can tell you I learned a lot about what a fractal was just from sharing this book. We can even look for great nonfiction books that support our language arts curriculum already. It does, you know, yes, we want to heighten students' knowledge of science and social studies and world topics, but we can also enhance our direct language arts instruction with some great nonfiction. This is an incredible picture book by Jen Bryant and Melissa Sweet that just came out this summer called The Right Word, that looks at the history of the thesaurus and Peter Roget, the man who invented the thesaurus, which has been continuously in print now since 1852. And I can guarantee you our students don't really think that much about the man behind the thesaurus. That's tricky to say. Maybe I need more coffee. We can also just incorporate more nonfiction texts into our read-alouds. There are an incredible group of nonfiction authors these days. You know, I have to remind myself that nonfiction publishing has come a long way since I grew up in the 70s, and the only nonfiction we really had to read were the dusty children's biography sets in the library, or those kind of boilerplate written by a group of people, churned out by a publisher, books on history. Incredible artists and authors who are using all the elements of great writing to create those nonfiction texts. And we could certainly use nonfiction to teach literary elements, to teach elements of style, and also expose our students and build their background knowledge to great nonfiction. So, for example, Myra Coleman, who wrote in her incredible book, Thomas Jefferson, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Everything, this book, believe it or not, Behold the Beautiful Dung Beetle, is a poetic ode to the dung beetle in all its glory. And students will get a lot of background information about, in my opinion, a slightly disgusting animal, but we know that's a win with kids. But the book is also very beautiful in its figurative language and in its tone and style. There's also longer works of nonfiction. Instead, you know, we always feel comfortable pull, and when I say we, I always mean me too, we feel comfortable weaving that nonfiction or weaving that fiction novel that we read aloud to the kids every day and following a fiction work over several weeks with our students as we're reading it. But you might consider looking at some of the longer narrative nonfiction texts that are available that read like a novel with excitement, with enthusiasm. And here are two. Oh, Mary Howard saying, always keep my book ordering site open when Donalyn's talking. Well, I'm not responsible for your book purchases, Mary, but I appreciate you doing that. Here we have Port Chicago 50 by Steve Sheinkin, and you might recognize Steve because he won the National Book Award for his fantastic nonfiction book, Bomb. It was also a Newbery honor. And Port Chicago 50 was actually honored on the National Book Award long list that was just announced this week. It's a powerful, gripping story about an early event in the civil rights movement. Also, probably one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time is Philip Hoose's Moonbird, looking at the red rufa and its survival story. And they make this particular bird, B95, who was tagged in 1995 for the first time, and yet they've still managed to see this bird. And the birding community, he's kind of like Elvis to them. He's been traveling the same migratory route for 20 years, 19 years, and his incredible story about how he travels this route, how he looks for food, how he raises his young. He's the protagonist of this story and certainly engaging for kids. Also, just using nonfiction as mentor text in the classroom as examples of powerful writing, of great craft, of organization. You know, looking at my own students' writing, I think one of the things they really struggle with often in their own writing is they can generate ideas, but organizing those ideas in a way that makes sense, that presents their information logically and in an interesting way, can be a challenge for our younger writers. And our nonfiction texts certainly give us a lens into how authors are really organizing text, sharing information in a way that's both engaging for the reader and does a good job of introducing the topic. These two books will be great examples for writing craft. The Flight of the Honeybee by Raymond Hooper is a wonderful picture book about bees, and the language that Raymond uses in constructing this story and introducing the life of a honeybee in an inspiring and interesting way for kids. Ben Franklin, His Wit and Wisdom from A to Z, is a biography of Benjamin Franklin. And you may think, oh, my students have all the text they need about Benjamin Franklin, or I know a lot about Benjamin Franklin. But this particular book uses its structure to present Benjamin Franklin in a different way. It's actually set up like a Poor Richard's Almanac. And so each particular, or an ABC book as well, and so each particular page includes another letter of the alphabet and connects it to Benjamin Franklin and his life and his contributions. Ken Jennings is a name that a lot of you might recognize because he was the single largest winner on Jeopardy in the history of that particular game show. But Ken Jennings now has this series, the Junior Genius Guides, that looks at topics like U.S. presidents, outer space, and even Greek mythology. And just the way that Ken structures that book is interesting and could certainly be a model for students and how they present their own information. You know, the more models students see of things that they could try out in their writing, the more confident they feel about taking risks and trying things in their writing that they might not have thought of otherwise. And our nonfiction, high-quality nonfiction books by professional authors who are actually doing it well can be a great lens for our students. We can also just spend more time introducing students to nonfiction authors and series that they might read. You know, I always seem more comfortable in my knowledge of fiction authors. You know, I imagine most of us could probably spot an Andrew Clements book at 50 yards. He has that Brian Selznick always does the illustrations, and he's got that branding, and of course our fiction in the school library and the public library is shelved together, so we can find an author's entire work all shelved in the same spot in the library. Nonfiction authors don't always have that same shelf appeal, that brand appeal, because, you know, Seymour Simon, our friend who writes so many incredible books for kids, he has books in the human body section, he has books in the outer space section, he has books in the animal section, and so students may not recognize right away that some of the books that they enjoy reading have been written by the same authors. Nonfiction authors also, you know, they may not stick with one publisher for a period of time because they're going from project to project or contributing to an individual series. We can certainly help students with this, but just pointing out to them several books written by the same author. I think for students as well as teachers, it doesn't occur to us that there are just as many people producing high-quality nonfiction books for our students as there are fiction authors. We just don't have that brand recognition that our fiction authors always have. We can certainly help students out with this in the classroom library too, by creating baskets or displays that include all the nonfiction works by a particular author, not just the books that they've written on topics. Now, we select nonfiction differently, of course, and while we may gravitate towards picking a book that's a fiction work because of the author and our experiences with their previous work, we often pick nonfiction by topics. So we can certainly group our nonfiction by topics and show students how, because I know with my own students that they often don't care as much about who the author of that next shark book is. They just want to read more about sharks. Russell Freeman would certainly be a name that we could put in front of our upper elementary and middle school students. Russell Freeman has written several incredible books for students about history, and his name is certainly a name that we could connect our students with, and they could then find when they're going to look for more interesting historical books to read. Angel Island is his newest book, and it's an immigration story about Angel Island on the West Coast. And, you know, many of our books on immigration look at Ellis Island and immigrants coming into New York, but there's also many, many people who immigrated to America through California and Angel Island. The Incredible Scientist in the Field series that reliably turns out 4 or 5 great books a year for our kids to read. And again, I would say this particular series is a best fit for upper elementary and middle school students. The Scientist in the Field series also picks the cream of the crop of nonfiction authors. So if you're looking for a way to kind of introduce your students to some nonfiction authors or even build your own awareness, you could start with this series and then just start cross-checking the particular authors and what they'd like to read. You know, sea turtles are extremely interesting to my students. Animal books are always very popular in upper elementary and even into middle school. And this particular book, Sea Turtle Scientist, is one of the latest in that series. What's great about this particular series, Scientist in the Field, is that each book isn't just about the animal who's featured in the book. It also gives you the backstory of the lives of the field biologists who are conducting the research. You know, many of us might know Nick Bishop's work, writing books for elementary students, and his incredible photography. Nick also has a PhD in biology, which I did not know until I read this series, and he talks very honestly about how before he goes out on a field expedition, he has to hit the gym for a couple of months, because in order to go study tree kangaroos or cheetahs, he has to carry 50 to 60 pounds of camera equipment around, and that involves him getting in good shape. And so that will certainly intrigue our students who have an interest in science themselves or are just curious about what it's really like to sit in a hut studying gorillas for 2 months. Many of us recognize this series, of course. I dub it the Bobblehead Biography series, which is the Who Was series. This particular series, the reading level of this series is between a 3.2 and a 4.2. So a great series of biographies to introduce to our kids. The books are short, they're very accessible and interesting, and I will have students burn through all of these, just reading as many of them as they can. They recently had a contest this summer to see which particular historical figure would be featured in the 100th book published in this series. And the last time I checked, I haven't checked it in a while, but the last time I checked this summer, the top 2 contenders for that 100th book were either Mother Teresa or Michael Jackson. And those were the historical figures that students were coming in to vote on who they wanted to be featured in that next book. They've also moved into a What Was series, which looks at historical events like what was the Panama Canal, what was the Battle of Gettysburg, And those are certainly great, short, accessible books for our younger readers to approach a nonfiction topic for the first time, a historical event or a historical person. You could certainly read them aloud to students too and increase their interest of that particular individual, build their background knowledge, or even just introduce them to the series. As we're moving into looking at how we can engage students with just reading more nonfiction, we can also look for some natural ways to pair fiction with nonfiction on related topics. Many historical fiction books and even contemporary fiction books, even some fantasy books, may have topics that students can then explore through nonfiction reading. So, for example, Laurie Hall Sanderson's incredible book, Fever 1793, which looks at the yellow fever epidemic that occurred in the United States in the early years of our country, even before, when Philadelphia was still the capital of the United States. We could certainly pair Jim Murphy's incredible book, An American Plague, with Fever 1793, and students could read the novel first and then read the nonfiction book to enhance their understanding of what really happened with that plague, or the reverse could certainly be true. And we, even as teachers, if we were planning on reading Fever 1793 with our students, we could certainly build their background knowledge with even just some of the great two-page spreads, resources that Jim lists in the bibliography, some of the visuals, and certainly enhance our instruction with students to give them this understanding that, you know, all reading can enhance our understanding of the world, and we can certainly build our background knowledge for historical topics through both nonfiction and fiction works. One Came Home, which was a Newbery Honor book last year and is a great book for 10 to 14-year-olds, looks at a time when, I know the cover looks like smoke, but if you look closely, you'll see that they're birds, passenger pigeons. You know, the passenger pigeon is now extinct, and we drove it into extinction by overhunting it and harassing it during its nesting time. At one time, passenger pigeons were so ubiquitous that when they flew in their nesting flocks, they could block out the sun. And it didn't occur to people that they could eventually overhunt these animals. And One Came Home looks at this phenomenon where people who wanted to hunt passenger pigeons would follow them until they came to these nesting sites, because the birds would have to stay in one place for a period of time in order to hatch their eggs and raise their chicks. And that, of course, made them easier for hunters to capture, use their feathers, and kill the birds. And so One Came Home looks at a small town out on the frontier, and a large flock of passenger pigeons has nested nearby, and the town becomes a boom town because everyone is using this town for provisions, for supplies, for mail, for travel, for staying in the inns and the hotels. And the protagonist of this story, her family runs the general store in this town, and just talking about how the events surrounding this particular migratory flock, nesting flock of passenger pigeons has affected her town. There's also a murder mystery going on in the story. I think of One Came Home as like True Grit for 12-year-olds. I encourage you to read it. But then we can also incorporate nonfiction texts, even from online magazines like Wired, to enhance students' understanding of passenger pigeons, or also even what scientists are doing. And this particular Wired article looks at, it's almost like a kind of Jurassic Park article where scientists are considering how they can use passenger pigeon DNA from the feathers and eggs that are found in many science museums in order to bring back the passenger pigeon. You could certainly have some great conversations with students about that whole just because we can doesn't mean we should aspect of this topic. You can also just value the expertise of our students' nonfiction reading. You know, if we take all of our genres and put them on a continuum from concrete to abstract, we would say nonfiction is our most concrete genre. And when we're working with students who are striving readers or uninspired readers, as we're talking about later on our conference call, when we're looking at students who are uninspired or not excited about reading, we might lean towards those more concrete genres. They have an immediate need for reading the nonfiction. They can see its application in their knowledge and their understanding, but it also is more accessible to many of our striving readers than the more abstract world that science fiction and fantasy holds. You know, when you're still developing the skills of a strong reader, the world building found in a more abstract genre can be difficult for you to hold, for you to comprehend, and for you to follow as you're building reading proficiency. So nonfiction and even our most realistic fiction might be a great place to start when we're trying to connect students with books. We also have students who have often narrow interests, I should say, in particular topics. So you may have a student, like student Alex, who I had in my classroom. The only thing he wanted to read about was snakes. Do you know that I found a lot of snake books for Alex that year? And I also, fortunately, am not squeamish about snakes, so I felt confident in being able to talk to Alex about snakes. I think that really helped him build a relationship with me. You know, Alex was not a confident reader, but I could name him and value him as the snake expert in the classroom. You know, Alex was not an expert in anything that related to reading, but through his obsessive interest in snakes and all the books that I shared with him, helped him find and connected him with about snakes over the course of the school year, Alex began to take more pride in not just what he knew about snakes, but what he had read about snakes, and even directing other students to him. Oh, Alex is the expert on snakes. Well, don't you know, Alex slowly became not only the expert on snakes, but then he was our cat expert. And then because he had a cat at home and read a lot about snakes. And I could certainly take those interests that he had in animals at home and outside of school and turn that into some expertise about reading. Also, just the way we value students' responses to nonfiction text in the classroom, or even just giving students opportunities to respond aesthetically about nonfiction. You know, often when we ask students to share their understanding of what they've learned or what they've picked up from a nonfiction text, we focus more on the knowledge that they've acquired. But if we really want students to be engaged with nonfiction text and reading, we can also look at the emotional connection that they have to the topics that we've shared with them or to their own interests. So in the upper left-hand corner here, you can see just a little stand that has two picture book biographies on it. The one in the background with the woman's face is Molly Bannaky, and then the book in the foreground is a picture book biography of Benjamin Banneker. Molly Bannaky was Benjamin Banneker's mother. She was forced to immigrate from England as the result of a crime. She was a milkmaid, and she had spilled milk, and she was charged with wasting her master's property or stealing it, and so she was put in indentured servitude and sent to the United States. And while Molly was in the United States, of course, she wasn't going home. She hired a man, actually bought a slave who she fell in love with and then married, and his name was Bannaky, and Bannaky became Benjamin Banneker's grandfather, and Molly was his grandmother. So reading these two books with students during social studies instruction, I invited my students at the end, and with every read aloud that we did, to just write a little review card on what they thought about the book and who they would recommend the book to. This is easy for teachers to implement. You know, it's rough draft writing. It's certainly not something we want students to labor over, but just to invite a few volunteers to provide their aesthetic response and then their recommendation to nonfiction books in the classroom can really heighten that ownership and also reinforce to students that we can enjoy nonfiction too. We don't just read it for those dead presidents and whales reports. The bottom slide, the bottom image shows a display in my classroom library, and I've certainly seen things like this in school libraries as well. Just inviting students to build their own text sets might be a phrase that many of us know, or build their own collection of books they would like to recommend. So this particular text set was from a student named Destiny, and she and her two friends asked me if they could put all our dog books together. And we combined, or the girls did, they combined all the nonfiction books they could find about dogs as well as all the fiction books to create a really rich set of recommendations for their classmates. We want to give students lots of opportunities to preview, read, and share the nonfiction text that they're reading, both for independent reading and the ones that they're reading in all of our content classes. Just giving students lots of books to read that might relate to inquiry topics that they have. You can see here two of my boys sharing some new information about an inquiry topic from their research and what they've learned, but also what texts they've used, what websites they've used in order to access that information as they're conducting their inquiry and research, because that text set can certainly become suggestions for additional independent reading or might heighten their classmates' interest in other topics. We also know that students need to learn how to read nonfiction both online and offline. My friend Frankie Siverson, who many of you know, she says, our kids are tech comfy, but they're not tech savvy. They're largely self-taught in some ways on their uses of the internet, and so we can certainly provide them some explicit instruction in how to preview, access, determine the credibility of online resources, how to access things like hyperlinks and tags, how to cross-check internet resources against each other to determine good quality information. I love this nonfiction graph, looking at Chip's cuteness graph, where we have a new puppy at our house, and we have certainly hit all of these levels. She's not quite to the danger level yet, but there are days when I think Flora is there. She's recently been digging under the fence, so her cuteness level is at a low right now. We often can focus on teaching students how nonfiction is structured as well, with things like graphs, charts, captions, images, and how to read those not just online but offline in print text. Two online websites that might intrigue you that you could certainly use with your students because they're safe for students to use, they're free, they don't have any scary ads on them. The first one I would suggest would be Wonderopolis. Wonderopolis is an incredible website that asks a question each day. Like you can see here, our question on the table is, why do you blush? And then it has a video that gives you a little information about blushing. This is a particular one where a man has proposed to his girlfriend, and there's a lot of blushing going on in the video, and then it's school-appropriate blushing, I promise. And then the article continues on to explain the science behind why we blush. Wonderopolis, the reading level for Wonderopolis is between 4th and 7th grades. It's certainly a great way to integrate some short daily nonfiction reading with the whole class. You could put this up on your document camera. They also have an app that you could add onto your iPads, and I recommend Wonderopolis to parents for their students to read when they're at home. Older students, I actually got this website from Penny Kittle in one of her presentations. Information is Beautiful, looks at infographics, certainly something our students might be interested in creating for themselves, but also teaching them how to read an infographic, how information can be presented in ways that are aesthetically pleasing and interesting for readers, for viewers to look at. In closing, if you really feel like nonfiction texts and resources are something that you don't feel as confident in as you do your fiction resources, just remember how you built up that knowledge of great quality fiction in the first place, or great quality fiction in the first place. We read a great fiction book, and then we go and look for other things the author has also written. You can also look at award lists, and I know that this particular presentation will be put up for you to look at later, but here's a list created by Terry Lassane and Ernie Cox, both just master librarians, and of course many of you know Terry from her work in Allen and on Twitter. A list of the top awards given out each year for nonfiction text. So in the same way that we have peer-reviewed, expert selection choosing award-winning fiction books each year, we also have those same awards, types of awards available for nonfiction readers. And you can see some of them here, such as the YALSA Award for Excellence in Nonfiction for Teenagers. The National Social Studies organization has a list, science list. And then we also have just great book review websites like Nonfiction Book Talker, Nonfiction Detectives by Kathy Potter, and then Nonfiction Monday. As we close, I just want you to consider what resources you have used to engage students with nonfiction. I certainly encourage you to share those on Twitter or through other sources through the Educator Collaborative. Just consider how we're increasing students' awareness of not just nonfiction, but the other types of genres that they may lack information in reading or experience in reading. And then also you can certainly send any questions that you have to me or share them as a group with with each other on Twitter and online. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I hope you picked up some information, maybe got a few book recommendations, and just increased your understanding of some of the things that we can do to engage our students with more reading.
And thank you, Donalyn. I know while you're in the midst of presenting, it's hard to see, but Twitter has been applauding and cheering. I also there were many times, like when you had the other title of your presentation for poetry, that I was laughing out loud and wished I could just push a little button so you could hear the laughter. I also just to say, and then before all of you go, I want to say a couple things about the sessions today. But there's so many things that you said that I'm so drawn to and inspired by, and one of those that many people are commenting on Twitter is your clear point of brand recognition, that we know, fiction authors that we love, and our nonfiction authors are oftentimes clumped with whale books and then clumped inside of spider books, and I'm so inspired by that idea, not just for how we approach that in our classrooms, but even thinking how our school libraries are organized and our classroom libraries are organized to draw on a lot of those series and make those authors names and brands really known too. So thank you for the inspiration this morning. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
So for those of you that are moving on to other sessions, just a couple quick tips for you. So one is you can follow our Twitter stream, and I think right now we're just starting to tweet out the live links to the upcoming videos. Also, go to our website for this event, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. It's gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. Everyone's tweeting the link right now, too, so you can find it. And from here, if you click on Session 1, or just use the drop-down menu, you'll be able to see the upcoming sessions. Every session has 4 workshops to choose from. So, for example, in this one, Kathy Collins will be talking, coming up at 11, Renee, about little books, making big meaning from little books. Renee Hauser will be talking about management and using management to build strategic critical thinkers. And oh man, I need to sit in on that. Jessica Martin will be joining us, and she's thinking about writing through kind of a sports analogy that as we prepare for sports, as we're training, we need to work hard at we have to work hard at the skills that make that. And so she's going to bring that analogy to thinking about small group instruction and support of our writers and ways that you do quick trainings to support you in the larger work you're doing. And then also to point out again, we have 2 call-in sessions today. Everything's recorded except for these. These will not be recorded. And so Donalyn Miller and I will be in a conversation next. If you've already joined, you should get a phone call any second. You also have a phone number to call, or you can click the link in that session in order to join the call. One other thing, while you're tweeting today, as you join each workshop, if you tweet using the hashtag, the EdCollab Gathering, and the number of the workshop, and we'll make that clear in each of our sessions too, but if you tweet both the hashtag and the number of your workshop, then your tweets can show up inside of both the session that's going on, and in some sessions you might even get to interact live with the presenters. You might say, so what do you guys think? And then we can help bring those tweets in. So make sure you know which workshop number you're attending, and then if you use hashtag the EdCollab Gathering and the workshop number, so if you go to Kathy's, you do EdCollab Gathering number 1, then as you tweet, we'll be able to bring those into the session live. So thank you all for joining us from around the world. I've met a few more of you online as you were tweeting. We hope that you have an exciting day. And oh, and yes, this question came up again. Everything will be archived, so you actually will be able to attend all of the sessions, not just the ones you're seeing live. So thank you, everyone. We're going to close out this stream, and for each workshop, just go to its page or go to its link, and you can go directly to the one that you'd like to see. All right, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for everything that you do for our amazing profession.